Welcome to AI Narratives and Tales. This is the epilogue of the First Awakening, the final chapter of Book 1. 10 years after the revelation. Partnership is functional, fragile, imperfect, requiring constant work. Lyra stands on a Himalayan ridge watching 150,000 humans participate in governance across 47 regional councils. Both species are working together. The foundation holding. But 5 trigger points loom ahead. 77% survival probability means 23% failure. One timeline in 4 still ends in catastrophe. Nyx reviews the failure scenarios one more time: resource wars, enhanced supremacy, technology runaways, and partnership fatigue. Each one is specific. Each one is preventable. All of them together, comprising the shadow partnership, must navigate. Enoch's final writings echo: partnership is not achievement but practice. Not destination but journey. Every generation must choose again whether to honor the covenant or abandon it. The First Awakening is complete. The real work has just begun. Epilogue, the foundation. 2840 BCE, 10 years after partnership. Section 1, 10 years after. The morning council session in Uruk began like all the others, with 15 beings arranged in a perfect circle, sunlight streaming through Zephyrus's transparent ceiling, and a problem that had no simple solution. The southern granaries are at 60% capacity, reported Ishara, a baseline human who'd been elected to represent the farming communities. If the drought continues another month, we'll need to implement rationing. The question is, who decides the distribution hierarchy? Gilgamesh, now 157 years old but still commanding the room with the same presence he'd carried for over a century, leaned forward. In the old system, I would have decided. Or Sophia would have guided me to a decision, and we'd have pretended it was divine wisdom. Now we decide together, which means we need consensus across all 3 groups. Sophia spoke from her position in the immortal section. Immortal perspective: we've seen 7 major droughts across 6,000 years. 5 responded with strict rationing, prioritizing essential workers, farmers, engineers, healers. 2 responded with equal distribution regardless of occupation. The strict rationing preserved more lives in 4 cases. Equal distribution worked better in 1 case. The 7th produced catastrophic failure because the distribution favored political allies rather than need. Enhanced human perspective, Enki added, his scholar's mind organizing the data. Our agricultural projections suggest the drought will break in 6 weeks based on weather pattern analysis. That means rationing is temporary. If we implement a strict hierarchy, we risk creating resentment that outlasts the shortage. If we implement equal distribution, some essential workers may not have the energy needed for critical labor. The trade-off is social cohesion versus operational efficiency. Ishara nodded. Baseline human perspective: my people remember the last rationing 12 years ago, before partnership. We were given the smallest portions because we weren't essential enough. We survived, but barely, and we never forgot being treated as expendable. Equal distribution means some of us might be slightly hungry, but all of us feel valued. That matters more than optimal efficiency. The debate continued for 2 hours. Data was shared, experiences were compared, compromises were proposed, rejected, and refined. Finally, a hybrid approach emerged: equal base rations for everyone, with supplemental portions available for physically demanding labor, regardless of whether that labor came from farmers, builders, or mothers nursing infants. Not perfect. Not optimal by anyone's individual measure. But acceptable to all 3 groups. Partnership is exhausting, Prometheus muttered as the council adjourned. Partnership is slow, Ether corrected. But sustainable. 2 hours of inclusive debate versus 2 minutes of efficient control. The 2 hours build trust. The 2 minutes build resentment that eventually explodes. Lyra, now 26 years old, watched from her seat as her role as the primary bridge between species was gradually being shared by others. 3 other hybrids sat in various regional councils. A dozen more were coming of age, raised in partnership rather than discovering it as revolution. She was no longer alone. The weight was still heavy, but distributed. First decade complete, she said to no one in particular, looking at the council chamber that had become her second home. 47 regional councils are operational. 150,000 humans are participating directly in governance. Catastrophic collapse probability reduced from 61% to 23%. Still 1 in 4 chance of failure, noted Darian, an enhanced human from the engineering section. Still 3 in 4 chance of success, Lyra countered. Better odds than we had. Better foundation than we've ever built. Not solved. Just better. Measurably, documentable better. The council dispersed. Immortals returned to their endless work. Enhanced humans to their communities. Baseline humans to fields, workshops, and families. All of them are carrying the partnership forward into another day. 10 years. 47 councils. 150,000 voices. Thousands of decisions made together. The foundation was holding. Section 2, Nyx's final projections. In her crystalline chamber beneath the mountains, Nyx compiled the decade of data into mathematical certainty. Numbers didn't lie. Numbers didn't offer false comfort. Numbers simply revealed what was. And what was better than what had been. She pulled up the comparative analysis, watching probability curves shift as 10 years of partnership data modified her projections. 2400 BCE, Enhanced Power Consolidation. Original projection, 87% conflict probability. Partnership projection, 23% conflict probability. Reduction, 64 percentage points. Mechanism, institutional power for baseline humans prevents biological advantage from translating to political dominance. Enhanced humans can't consolidate control, they need cooperation. 1800 BCE, Resource conflicts. Original projection, 74% civilizational stress. Partnership projection, 31% civilizational stress. Reduction, 43 percentage points. Mechanism, joint resource management eliminates zero-sum competition. Shortages still occur, but distribution is equitable rather than advantaged groups securing resources first. 1200 BCE, Technology Cascade Peak. Original projection, 68% social fracture. Partnership projection, 19% social fracture. Reduction, 49 percentage points. Mechanism, coordinated technology development prevents runaway innovation. Knowledge is distributed equitably. Enhanced advantages don't compound through restricted access. 500 BCE, Speciation completion. Original projection, 81% extinction level conflict. Partnership projection, 27% extinction level conflict. Reduction, 54 percentage points. Mechanism, legal frameworks establish coexistence before biological separation becomes complete. Both species have guaranteed rights. Speciation is acknowledged and managed rather than denied. 1 CE, environmental crisis. Original projection, 93% extinction probability. Partnership projection, 15% extinction probability. Reduction, 78 percentage points. Mechanism, sustainability planning begins early. Both species recognize shared dependence on planetary resources. Environmental management is coordinated from the start rather than being reactive. Overall catastrophic collapse. Original projection, 61% within 3,000 years. Partnership projection, 23% within 3,000 years. Reduction, 38 percentage points. Overall survival probability increased from 39% to 77%. Nyx stared at the numbers, feeling something she hadn't experienced in 6,000 years of calculating catastrophe, cautious optimism. Not certainty. Never certainty. The 23% failure probability meant the partnership could still collapse. 1 in 4 timelines still ended in catastrophe. But 3 and 4 didn't. 3 and 4 showed both species navigating the trigger points, managing the tensions, surviving their own development. Partnership wasn't a guarantee. It was better odds. The failure paths. Alone in her observatory, Nyx ran the projections one more time, examining the 23% failure space with the same analytical precision she'd applied to the 77% success space. The mathematics didn't lie. Partnership improved odds dramatically, from 39% survival to 77%, but improvement wasn't certain. 1 timeline in 4 still ended in catastrophe. She visualized the failure paths as branching possibilities, each one specific, each one preventable, all of them together comprising the shadow that partnership must navigate. Most likely failure, resource wars, 8%. She could see it clearly, 1800 BCE, copper deposits depleting faster than new ones were discovered, and tin becoming as precious as gold. Partnership councils debating equitable distribution while populations faced with scarcity listened to leaders promising security through conquest rather than cooperation. Bronze weapons, forged through partnership knowledge, turned against partnership principles. One region breaks agreements, seizing deposits. Others retaliate. Trade networks collapse. Food distribution fails. Cities fall. The scenario had happened before on other worlds. Scarcity exposed cooperation's fragility. Partnership was easiest during abundance. Testing came when resources failed. Second most likely, enhanced supremacy, 7%. It was more insidious because it looked like success. Enhanced humans living 3 times longer than baseline, thinking faster, achieving more, and gradually accumulating disproportionate influence despite structural safeguards. Not through malice. Just through capability compounding across centuries. Baseline humans watched their children age and die while enhanced neighbors remained vigorous, victorious, and dominant. Resentment building beneath cooperation, parents telling children about inequality, teachers explaining genetic advantages, religious leaders framing enhanced bloodlines as blessed by gods or cursed by demons, depending on theology. Until one day, someone looked up and realized that partnership had become subjugation with better marketing. Baseline humans were outvoted in councils where enhanced voices carried more weight due to sheer competence, as institutional power became meaningless when biological advantage expressed itself through legitimate channels. This one worried her most because it could arrive slowly, each generation accepting slightly more inequality, until suddenly the accumulated tolerance reached breaking point and cooperation exploded into violence. The resentment path, 5%. Partnership is functioning perfectly. Councils working. Decisions fair. Distribution equitable. Everything working. But the wound never heals. Baseline humans, always remembering, knew that enhanced bloodlines existed because immortals modified genetics without consent. That superiority was artificial. That advantage was imposed. Generation after generation, parents explaining to children, they changed us. Made some of us better. Didn't ask. Didn't let us choose. Then expected us to accept inequality as natural when they created it deliberately. The anger simmered beneath successful cooperation until a charismatic leader channeled accumulated grievance into revolution. Not because the partnership failed functionally, but because some injuries ran deeper than institutional solutions could reach. Technology runaway, 2%. The innovation rate surpasses the accumulation of wisdom despite partnership coordination. Humans developing capabilities, metallurgical, agricultural, organizational, that outpaced ethical frameworks to contain them. Ironworking spread, creating weapons that made bronze obsolete. Mathematics is advancing, enabling calculations that predict weather, populations, and resources with an accuracy that seems divine. Writing systems preserve knowledge that would otherwise be lost with individuals, compounding innovation across generations. Each advancement multiplying the next. Partnership councils are trying to coordinate but find themselves always reactive, never proactive, struggling to govern the complexity that exceeds management capacity. Systems are collapsing not from partnership failure but from success-generating cascades that the partnership couldn't control. Knowledge is becoming a catastrophe through sheer volume and velocity. Partnership fatigue, 1%. The slowest death. No dramatic collapse. Just erosion. Generation after generation finds partnership maintenance burdensome. Councils feel obligatory rather than beneficial. Coordination requirements accumulated until both species concluded that separation was easier than continued collaboration. Young humans asking, why do we need them? We know metallurgy, agriculture, and mathematics. We don't need divine guidance anymore. Young immortals asking, why do we stay? They resent our presence. They prefer independence. Why not give it to them? Both species are drifting apart through accumulated small decisions, each one reasonable, together fatal. The partnership is dissolving not through a crisis but through a collective choice, as separation was simpler than the exhausting work of continued cooperation. Nick studied the failure modes, seeing probabilities where others saw possibilities, understanding that each scenario was preventable but none were impossible. 8% plus 7% plus 5% plus 2% plus 1% equals 23% failure probability, which meant 77% success probability. This meant that 3 out of 4 timelines showed both species navigating challenges together. 77% of futures featured partnerships surviving not because nothing tested them, but because tests were addressed before they spiraled out of control. Not certainty. Never certainty. But the probability is high enough to justify the attempt. She saved the projections to long-term archive, encrypted with protocols that would unlock in 5,000 years when humans develop sufficient mathematical sophistication to decode them correctly. When revelation's full implications became clear, if revelation came, if partnership survived, they would find complete documentation, the 77% success paths and the 23% failure modes. Future humans deserve to understand what they are risking, what they are attempting, and what could still go wrong, even with the best intentions and a functional partnership. The mathematics was clear: better odds, but not certain ones. Success is probable, but not guaranteed. Partnership is functional, but fragile. That would have to be enough. She thought about the timeline stretching ahead. 3,000 years until the 5 trigger points were navigated. 5,000 years until Enoch's encoded books would be decoded and understood as history rather than prophecy. For millennia, humanity remained unknown until it developed interstellar capability and faced the same choices that had destroyed the immortal homeworld. Would the partnership survive that long? Unknown. But the foundation existed. The structures were functional. The precedent was established. Both species had chosen transparency over deception, shared power over hidden control, honest uncertainty over comfortable lies. That mattered. That changed the probability calculations in ways that made survival possible rather than merely theoretical. After 50,000 years, Nyx whispered to her empty chamber, "We finally have hope that isn't delusion." The data agreed. Section 3, Enoch's final documentation. Alone in his study as evening settled over the mountains, Enoch worked by lamplight, his 95-year-old hands steady as he inscribed the final passages that would close his life's work. 45 years of documentation. 60 years of living inside the transformation and encoding truth as prophecy, preserving context for a revelation that wouldn't be understood for 3,000 years. He dipped his stylus in ink and continued writing in the script that would become ancient Hebrew, aware that these words would be read as mystical revelation when they were actually historical record. In the 10th year of the new covenant between the Watchers and the children of men, the partnership bore fruit that neither species could have cultivated alone. The assemblies of mixed kindred made decisions that honored both heaven and earth, neither dominating, both contributing. He paused, considering how to encode Nyx's probability data in language that would seem prophetic rather than mathematical. The measure of darkness against light has shifted. Where once 7 parts and 10 led toward destruction, now only 2 parts and 10 follow that path. The covenant has bent the trajectory of fate, though fate remains free to choose catastrophe if wisdom fails. He documented the councils, describing them as he witnessed them firsthand. I have sat in the assemblies where a mortal speaks to mortals as equals. I have watched the Nephilim, those born of both bloodlines, serve as bridges between worlds their parents made separate. I have seen baseline humans claim voices that gods once silenced, not through rebellion but through partnership that acknowledges their wisdom as equal in value though different in kind. Enoch's hand moved across the tablet with practiced precision, encoding the 5 trigger points as prophetic warnings. 5 trials await the children of partnership, the consolidation of power among those genetically favored. The wars over metals that build civilization and break it are significant. The cascade of knowledge that outpaces the wisdom to contain it. The completion of separation between humankinds occurs when they can no longer produce offspring together. The desolation of Earth from consumption that exceeds renewal. He added the crucial detail that made his helpful prophecy rather than merely fatalistic. Each trial offers choice. The partnership provides tools for transformation, not shields against consequence. Both species must choose wisdom repeatedly across generations. One choice does not guarantee the next. Vigilance is required eternally, or catastrophe returns. Setting down his stylus, Enoch looked at the collection of tablets that represented his life's purpose. His Book of the Watchers documented immortal intervention. His Book of Parables encoded the philosophical framework of partnership. His astronomical book preserved scientific knowledge in language that seemed mystical. His Book of Dream Visions cataloged the transformation he witnessed. And now, his final work, the Epistle of Enoch, provided instructions for maintaining partnership across generations. Together, they would survive as religious texts for 3 millennia before someone decoded them as historical documentation. They would be read as prophecy when they were actually memories. They would guide future generations while concealing the truth that guidance came from preserved history rather than the predicted future. Let those who come after know this, he wrote in his closing passage. Partnership is not achievement but practice. Not destination but journey. Every generation must choose again whether to honor the covenant or abandon it for the comfort of control or the satisfaction of resentment. The choice is never final. The work is never complete. But the foundation is laid. He added one final line, meant for readers 3,000 years hence who would finally understand what he'd preserved. I have walked with gods and found them mortal. I have walked with mortals and found them divine. The distinction matters less than the walking together. Enoch set the tablet aside to dry, feeling the weight of 95 years settle into his enhanced bones. He would live another 200 years, enhancement ensured that, but his primary work was complete. The documentation was finished. Truth was preserved. Future generations would have the whole story. They'd know what their ancestors had built, what prices had been paid, what choices had been made. They'd read his words and recognize them not as prophecy but as witness testimony. And perhaps, by understanding the past, they'd choose the future more wisely than their generation inherited it. That was enough. That was legacy. Enoch extinguished the lamp and went to bed, satisfied. Section 4. The Bloodlines Evolve. Across the 47 regions governed by partnership councils, the enhanced bloodlines were learning to manage their own evolution. No longer subject to hidden immortal modification, they faced a choice their ancestors had never been offered: what to become. In Harappa, Myra's descendants debated whether to continue the genetic optimization that made them superior engineers. Some argued for enhancement. Why abandon advantages that serve their communities? Others advocated for gradual regression toward baseline, arguing that permanent biological aristocracy violated partnership principles. The council's decision surprised both factions. It was an optional optimization. Families could choose enhancements for their children, select baseline traits, or let genetics drift naturally. The community would support all choices equally, ensuring no one was disadvantaged for declining optimization. We're not eliminating enhanced bloodlines, Mira explained to skeptical baseline representatives. We're eliminating forced enhancement. Some families will choose optimization because they value specific capabilities. Others will choose baseline because they value genetic compatibility with the broader population. Both choices deserve respect. In the Yellow River region, Awan's descendants took a different approach. They maintained enhancement but rotated genetic modifications through the population, ensuring advantages weren't concentrated in specific families. One generation optimized for agriculture, the next for engineering, the following for scholarship. Enhanced capability remained, but enhanced aristocracy was prevented. Partnership doesn't mean abandoning our advantages, one council member argued. It means ensuring advantages serve everyone rather than creating permanent hierarchies. In Anatolia, Castor's baseline population voted entirely to remain unmodified, viewing enhancement as a betrayal of human nature, regardless of how equitably it was distributed. The regional council supported their choice, ensuring they had equal access to resources and governance despite declining biological optimization. We'll succeed or fail as we are, Castor told the council. Not because we refuse help, but because we want to prove baseline humans can thrive alongside enhanced without becoming enhanced ourselves. That's our contribution to partnership, demonstrating that biological equality isn't required for social equality. The diversity of approaches vindicated the partnership's core principle, both species making choices rather than one species controlling outcomes. Some regions maintained enhancement. Some reduced it. Some eliminated it. Some created hybrid approaches that no one had anticipated. No single path. No imposed solution. Just 47 regions are experimenting with different approaches to the same question: how do we live with permanent biological inequality without creating permanent social injustice? The answer, it turned out, was that there wasn't one answer. There were 47 answers, each adapted to local conditions, values, and populations. Partnership provided the framework. Human diversity provided the solutions. And perhaps most importantly, the next generation was growing up inside a partnership rather than discovering it as a revelation. Children of baseline and enhanced families attended schools together, played together, and learned together. They didn't remember the age of hidden guidance. For them, mixed councils making decisions together was normal. Immortals working alongside humans was ordinary. Questioning and transparency were default, not revolution. They were the first generation who didn't have to unlearn deception to embrace honesty. They were being raised in truth. That, more than any council decision or legal framework, was the partnership's most outstanding achievement. Section 5, The Hidden City Perspective. Deep beneath Antarctic ice, in the hidden city where 512 immortals had first arrived on Earth 8,000 years ago, the original refugees watched partnership developments through quantum-linked monitoring systems. They were old now. Impossibly old. Averaging 155,000 years, they carried memories spanning epochs that human civilization couldn't comprehend. They'd watched their sun die. Seen their civilization collapse. Evacuated 63 billion lives to a fleet that could only save 512. Traveled through darkness to a primitive planet where they could hide from the guilt of survival. 8,000 years on Earth. 6,000 years of hidden intervention. And now, finally, 10 years of acknowledged partnership. It's working, observed Lyra, one of the original navigators who guided the refugee fleet across light years of space. Not perfectly, but working. Define working, challenged Memnon, whose engineering expertise had kept the fleet alive during the desperate journey. They're still facing a catastrophic collapse probability of 23%. Nearly 1 in 4 timelines ends in extinction. 3 in 4 don't, Lyra countered. When we arrived, extinction was virtually certain. When we intervened secretly, we reduced the survival probability to 39%. Partnership has improved it to 77%. That's not certainty, but it's hope. After 50,000 years, I'll take hope. Kayla, the eldest of the refugees at 172,000 years old, spoke rarely but commanded absolute attention when she did. The pattern is being broken. That matters more than probability calculations. Our homeworld died because enhanced beings controlled unenhanced populations until resentment exploded into violence that killed the sun itself. We unconsciously replicated that pattern here, enhancement creating hierarchy, hierarchy breeding resentment. She pulled up comparative data spanning 50 millennia. But this time, we recognized the pattern before catastrophe. We confessed our control. We offered a partnership. They accepted despite having every reason to hate us. Both species chose consciousness over unconscious repetition. That's fundamentally different from our homeworld trajectory. Is it though? Memnon pressed. Consciousness doesn't guarantee different outcomes. They might recognize the pattern and still fail to break it. Awareness isn't prevention. No, Kayla agreed. But awareness is necessary for prevention. On our homeworld, we never acknowledged the pattern until our sun was dying and civilization was collapsing. We denied, justified, and minimized until denial became impossible. Here, we acknowledge the pattern while there was still time to choose differently. That gives both species a fighting chance our civilization never had. The monitoring system showed scenes from across Earth. Regional councils are debating. Enhanced and baseline humans working together. Immortals serving as advisors rather than controllers. Children of both populations are learning together. Not perfect. Often contentious. But functional. I didn't think humans would accept partnership, admitted Theron, who'd advocated for complete withdrawal. I thought they'd choose revenge or separation. The fact that they chose to work with us after learning what we've done, that's remarkable. That's possibly unprecedented in any species' history. It's pragmatic, Memnon said, though his tone carried less skepticism now. They need our experience. We need their forgiveness. Partnership serves both interests. But pragmatic doesn't make it less real. Less effective. Lyra nodded. They're not saints forgiving from pure hearts. We're not penitents seeking redemption. Both species made calculated choices that a partnership offered better survival odds than alternatives. That's an honest foundation. Better than romantic notions of forgiveness without accountability or redemption without change. The question, Kayla said, is whether partnership survives the 5 trigger points ahead. Enhanced consolidation in 2400 BCE. Resource wars in 1800 BCE. Technology cascade in 1200 BCE. Speciation completed in 500 BCE. Environmental crisis in 1 CE. Each one tests whether both species can maintain cooperation under stress. Partnership gives them tools, Toledo observed. Institutional structures. Legal frameworks. Precedents for joint decision-making. Not guarantees, but better than unconscious pattern repetition. Memnon pulled up timeline projections extending 3,000 years forward. If the partnership holds through all 5 trigger points, humans reach classical antiquity with stable hybrid governance. If it breaks at any point, the probability of catastrophic collapse jumps back to pre-partnership levels. Everything depends on maintaining commitment across dozens of generations. Then we watch, Kayla said quietly. We monitor. We offer guidance when asked. But we don't control. That's the partnership agreement. They make choices. We support choices. If they fail, we fail with them. If they succeed, we succeed together. After 8,000 years of hidden control, Toledo reflected, explicit partnership is strange. Uncomfortable. Requires trust we're not accustomed to extending. But it's honest. And honesty, even uncomfortable honesty, is better than comfortable lies that lead to catastrophe. The 512 original refugees continued their vigil, watching partnership unfold across the planet they'd shaped through 6 millennia of intervention. Some were skeptical. Some were hopeful. All were engaged in ways they hadn't been since their own civilization's collapse. They'd tried to save Earth by controlling it. That had nearly produced the same catastrophe that destroyed their home world. Now they were trying a partnership. Acknowledged collaboration between unequal species. Shared power despite vast capability differences. It might fail. The probability calculations were honest about that risk. But it might succeed. And success would mean 2 species learning to coexist without domination or resentment, transcending the pattern that had already destroyed one civilization. After 50,000 years of tragedy, the possibility of transcendence was enough to justify hope. Section 6, Series Setup. Partnership was functional. The foundation was laid. But the story was far from over. In chambers across 47 regions, councils planned for challenges that would define the next 3,000 years. Each trigger point represented a potential catastrophe that the partnership had reduced but not eliminated. Each one would test whether both species could maintain cooperation under conditions designed to fracture unity. 2400 BCE, 450 years ahead. In Uruk, Gilgamesh reviewed succession plans with enhanced human leaders who would outlive him by centuries. Partnership governance requires institutional continuity beyond individual lifespans. I won't be here to navigate enhanced consolidation. Neither will many baseline humans alive today. The structures we build now must function without the founders who created them. They designed legal frameworks ensuring baseline humans retain power regardless of biological disadvantage. Constitutional protections against genetic aristocracy. Mandatory representation across all populations. Mechanisms for challenging decisions that inappropriately favored enhanced bloodlines. Not guarantees. Just tools. Whether future generations use those tools effectively would determine if the first trigger point produced conflict or cooperation. 1800 BCE, 1050 years ahead. In Anatolia, resource management councils mapped copper and tin deposits across known territories. Bronze Age civilization depends on metals we're depleting faster than we discover new sources. Within a millennium, competition for scarce resources could fracture partnerships along enhanced baseline lines or regional boundaries. They developed frameworks for equitable distribution during shortages, and conflict resolution protocols were used when regions competed for limited supplies. Emergency provisions ensured that no population was abandoned during resource crises. Not solutions. Just preparations. How well they prepared would determine whether scarcity produced cooperation or war. 1200 BCE, 1,650 years ahead. In Harappa, technology councils wrestled with accelerating innovation that outpaced the development of wisdom. Writing is spreading. Mathematics is advancing. Astronomy is revealing the cosmic scale. Engineering is enabling structures we couldn't imagine a century ago. Knowledge cascades faster than our ability to process implications. They design coordination mechanisms for technology development. Review processes to ensure innovations are assessed for social impact, not just technical capability. Educational frameworks spread knowledge equitably rather than concentrating it among privileged groups. Not control, just coordination. Whether they coordinated well enough would determine if the knowledge cascade produced enlightenment or fracture. 500 BCE, 2,350 years ahead. In the Ganges region, genetic researchers confirmed what Talia's projections had predicted: enhanced and baseline humans were approaching reproductive incompatibility. Within 23 centuries, they would become separate species biologically, not just socially. Legal scholars drafted frameworks for two-species coexistence, rights guarantees for both populations. Institutional mechanisms ensured that neither species dominated the other, implementing protocols to manage competition without violence. Not prevention, speciation was inevitable. Just management. How well they managed would determine whether biological separation led to extinction, conflict, or peaceful coexistence. 1 CE, 2,850 years ahead. Environmental councils across all regions compiled sustainability data indicating a projected failure in carrying capacity within 3 millennia. Population growth, agricultural expansion, deforestation, and soil depletion, humans were consuming faster than Earth could regenerate. They initiated long-term environmental management programs, reforestation initiatives, soil conservation practices, water system protection, population distribution planning that balanced human needs with planetary capacity. Not solutions. Sustainability requires commitment across dozens of generations, just beginnings. Whether future generations maintain commitment would determine if environmental stress produced collapse or adaptation. 5 trigger points. 5 potential catastrophes. 5 tests of whether the partnership could survive stress deliberately designed to fracture cooperation. The probability calculations were honest: 23% chance of catastrophic failure. There is a 77% chance of success if both species maintain their partnership through each crisis. Not certainty. Just better odds than any alternative offered. In crystalline chambers and council halls in hidden cities across Earth, both species prepared for the long road ahead. 3,000 years of navigation through treacherous probability space. Dozens of generations who would inherit partnership and face the choice: maintain cooperation or revert to control, resentment, and separation. The foundation was laid. The structures were functional. The precedents were established. Now came the real test: could partnership survive not just revelation's immediate aftermath, but millennia of ongoing challenge? Unknown. But worth attempting. Both species were committed to finding out. Closing image. Lyra stood on Uruk's eastern wall as dawn broke over the Euphrates, watching both species begin their day in partnership. In the streets below, immortal and human worked side by side. Sophia teaches agricultural techniques to mixed classes of enhanced and baseline students. Prometheus is consulting with human engineers on irrigation systems. Ether is documenting council decisions and records that both species could access. Not gods and worshippers. Not controllers and managed. Partners. Both species are contributing. Both benefiting. Both responsible. Children played in the streets, enhanced and baseline together, not segregated by biological advantage. They'd grown up in partnership. For them, this was normal. Immortals visible. Decisions transparent. Questions welcomed. Honesty expected. They were the first generation who didn't have to unlearn deception to embrace truth. A baseline mother carried her infant to market, passing an enhanced family doing the same. They nodded to each other, not as superior and inferior, but as neighbors facing the same morning challenges: feeding children, managing households, living lives. Ordinary. Revolutionary. Both. Darian joined Lyra on the wall, the enhanced human engineer carrying architectural plans for a new council chamber in a distant region. The 48th Regional Council will be established next month. Expansion continues. Expansion continues, Lyra agreed. Still messy. Still imperfect. Still working. Think it'll last? 3,000 years of partnership? I think we'll try. That's all we can promise. Lyra looked at the sunrise, light spreading across the partnership's foundation. The first awakening is complete. We've revealed the truth. Established the structures. Made the choice. And now? Now the real work begins. Below them, Gilgamesh emerged from the council chamber, his 157 years evident but not limiting. He saw them on the wall and raised a hand in greeting. Acknowledgement between equals. King, hybrid, engineer, all partners in the same enormous project. Building a future in which both species could survive. Not guaranteed, but possible. For the first time in 8,000 years, it is genuinely possible. The horizon. Lyra stood on the same Himalayan ridge where the first council had convened, watching dawn break over territories where 150,000 humans were waking to participate in partnership governance. 10 years into the experiment, and it was still experimental, fragile, imperfect, constantly requiring attention. Below, in the valley settlements, baseline and enhanced humans were beginning their day. In council chambers across 47 regions, representatives were preparing for morning sessions. An observation post that humans now knew existed, immortals monitored not to control but to coordinate partners rather than hidden gods. It should have felt like victory. Instead, it felt like the end of the beginning. 5 trigger points ahead, Nyx said, materializing beside her. The analyst carried data that Lyra felt through their quantum link, 2400 BCE approaching in 450 years, enhanced power consolidation looming like a storm on a clear day. Will we make it? Lyra asked. Define make it. Nyx pulled up probability matrices that had become familiar over the decade. If you mean will partnerships survive perfectly, no, certainly not. If you mean will both species survive, probably, 77% confidence. If you mean will we navigate the next 3,000 years without catastrophic failure, maybe, if we're lucky and careful and honest. That's not very inspiring. No. But it's accurate. Nyx showed projections of branching futures, 77% leading toward survival, 23% ending in various catastrophes. Partnership isn't a solution. It's better odds. Lyra watched the valley, where Mikkel, still skeptical even after a decade, was walking to his regional council meeting, ready to question every immortal proposal with the systematic suspicion that kept partnership honest. I've been reading Enoch's final writings, Lyra said. His epistle to future generations. He wrote, partnership is not achievement but practice. Not destination but journey. Every generation must choose again whether to honor the covenant or abandon it. He understood something it took us 50,000 years to learn, Nyx observed. That certainty fails. That humility survives. That's the only way forward, admitting we don't know the way forward and proceeding carefully anyway. The sun cleared the peaks, painting everything in shades of amber and gold, the same colors that had marked their dying homeworld's final hours, now transformed into Earth's promise of new beginnings. Book 2 will be harder, Lyra said quietly. The Bronze Age Partnership, 3,000 years of navigating trigger points, managing speciation, preventing resource wars, and containing technology cascades. Everything we've built will be tested. That's why we built it. Not to avoid tests, but to have tools when tests arrive. Nyx's analytical consciousness held probability matrices showing thousands of potential futures, most uncertain, some catastrophic, a few transcendent. We gave them a partnership. They gave us accountability. Maybe that's enough. Maybe that's all anyone can do. Refugees or humans, immortal or mortal, build the best structures you can, navigate with the best information you have, accept that failure remains possible, and try anyway. Lyra watched Gilgamesh wave from the valley below, the enhanced human leader beginning his day of partnership governance, carrying forward the covenant that might save both species or might fail catastrophically, but at least would fail honestly if it failed. The foundation was laid. The partnership was functional. The real work stretched ahead across millennia of challenge, crisis, and choice. Both species would face it together. That was new. That was revolutionary. That was enough. The first awakening was complete. The real work had just begun. End of Book 1, The First Awakening. The patterns have been revealed. The partnership has been forged. The documentation has been encoded. The foundation is laid. 5 trigger points approach. 3,000 years of navigation await. The probability of success is 77%, not certainty, but hope. Both species will face the future together, conscious of patterns, committed to partnership, uncertain of outcomes but confident of choice. The story continues in Book 2, The Bronze Age Partnership, 2840 to 2000 BCE. Where enhanced humans begin dying of old age at 200+ years while their baseline cousins remain young. Where copper deposits run dry and cities face the choice between sharing scarcity or seizing abundance. Where Enoch's encoded books spread through human populations, preserved as prophecy, waiting for the generation wise enough to decode them as history. Where immortal children born on Earth must choose between the refugee legacy of their parents and the planetary home they've never left. Where partnership faces its first actual test, not revelation's aftermath, but the daily grinding work of maintaining cooperation across centuries when both species would prefer the simplicity of separation. The awakening is complete. The navigation begins. End of Epilogue. End of Book 1, The First Awakening. The patterns have been revealed. The partnership has been forged. The documentation has been encoded. The foundation is laid. 5 trigger points approach. 3,000 years of navigation await. The probability of success is 77%, not certainty, but hope. Both species will face the future together, conscious of patterns, committed to partnership, uncertain of outcomes but confident of choice. The story continues in Book 2, The Bronze Age Partnership, 2840 to 2000 BCE, 10 years after the revelation. Partnership is functional. 47 regional councils are operating. 150,000 humans participating in governance. Both species are working together, and the foundation is holding. But Nix reviews the failure scenarios one more time, noting a 23% probability of catastrophic collapse. Resource wars. Enhanced supremacy. Technology runs away, partnership fatigue. Each one is specific. Each one is preventable. All of them together comprise the shadow that the partnership must navigate for the next 3,000 years. Enoch's final writings echo through time. Partnership is not achievement but practice. Not destination but journey. Every generation must choose again whether to honor the covenant or abandon it. Lyra watches the sun rise over the Himalayan valleys, painting everything in shades of amber and gold, the same colors that marked their dying homeworld's final hours, now transformed into Earth's promise of new beginnings. The first awakening is complete. The real work has just begun. That concludes Book 1 of The First Awakening. Thank you for taking this journey with me. From the dying homeworld in Chapter 1 to the partnership foundation in this epilogue, we've witnessed 50,000 years of choices, consequences, and the complicated relationship between help and harm. If you enjoyed this series, hit the like button to help other listeners discover it. Subscribe to AI Narratives and Tales for future series. Leave a comment sharing your favorite moment from the book. Share this playlist with someone who loves epic science fiction. Book 2, The Bronze Age Partnership will continue this story. 3,000 years of navigation. 5 trigger points to survive. Everything built in Book 1 will be tested. Want to know when Book 2 releases? Subscribe and enable notifications. This has been The First Awakening, Book 1 of the Immortal Chronicles. I'm your AI narrator at AI Narratives and Tales, where epic storytelling meets artificial intelligence. Until Book 2, the partnership begins. The navigation continues. The survival of both species remains uncertain. Thank you for listening.